Welcome to Whispers of History, where forgotten tales, strange events, and mysterious moments from the past come alive. One whisper at a time. Subscribe, relax, and let the past whisper you to sleep. Soft ambient crackling. The hush of linen folding. Tonight, we begin with a whisper that lives between threads, hidden in hems and collars, stitched softly and slowly into the underclothes of long-forgotten lives. In the Renaissance world, outerwear was for display. But the underlayer, the linen shift, chemise, or shirt, was an intimate, personal realm. Pressed close to the skin. Washed, folded, touched every single day, and because it lived closest to the body, it became a canvas for quiet rituals. A woman in Florence in 1543, or a man in Lubeck in 1490, might lift a shift from a drying rack and see, just near the hem, a tiny green sprig. A small crescent. Or her own initials interlaced with someone else's. Not embroidery for beauty, but for meaning, these were linen tattoos. Invisible to the world. Unseen beneath layers of wool, velvet, and fur. But sacred to the wearer. Each mark was a ritual, part memory, part charm, part insurance against loss in the crowded, communal laundry world. Let us step now into a modest household in Siena. There, a woman named Alessandra begins her day at first light. The shutters are half open. The terracotta roof tiles outside glow faintly. Her fingers are pricked from needlework. She folds a white chemise carefully. Near the collar, a blue thread forms a looping A. Next to it, 2 stars. One with 8 points, the other 7, each stitch tells her story. The stars. One for her sister, who passed in spring. The other for her daughter's birth last autumn. The linen was plain at first, but she added meaning as life moved forward. This was common. And it was personal. Women often stitched their own linen. For themselves, or for their household. Sometimes with practical marks, initials, household symbols, tally lines for counting laundry. Other times, tiny motifs that served as spiritual amulets, figures of saints, tiny crosses, leaf patterns, even miniature animals. The embroidery rarely showed on the outside. It was tucked near seams, cuffs, or waistlines. Some were simple red thread marks. Others used faded blues and greens, dyed from indigo or weld. Few survive. Time has dissolved most. The sweat of wear, the repeated washing, the passage of centuries, but in archives across Europe, historians have found them. A chemise from 1530 bearing interlaced EH initials in crimson. A boy's shirt from Sweden stitched with a bird pattern, meant to prevent nightmares. A linen sleeve embroidered with a ladder motif, believed to guide the soul to heaven in sleep. You see, the Renaissance was both deeply religious and deeply practical. Faith and fabric wove together. What better place to express that than cloth worn every day? Let us linger here, let us breathe with Alessandra as she warms her hands near the hearth, her laundry drying above her, the soft scent of lye soap and rosemary lingering in the folds. As the fire crackles, she threads another needle. Backstitch. Cross-stitch. Tiny loops. Her eyes squint. Her back aches. But her mind is calm. Each symbol placed carefully, not for others to see, but for her to know. And that knowing is enough. This was the slow ritual of everyday life. Quiet. Repetitive. Anchored in meaning, so as you settle into sleep tonight, think of the lives stitched silently into linen. Of hands repeating the same motion, over and over, beneath candlelight. Of symbols speaking, but only to those who knew how to listen. The fabric may have faded, but the meaning remains. As we return to our quiet journey through the folds of Renaissance linen, let us settle now into something even more intimate than thread, symbols, not painted on walls, or carved in stone, but stitched, silently, slowly, into cloth worn beneath the outer world. To us, these may seem like idle decorations. A flower, a star, a tiny cross near the collarbone, but for a woman like Caterina in 1524 Florence, these were far more. They were anchors. They were prayers. They were language without ink. Let us imagine her. She wakes before the bell tolls the hour. The world outside her window is not yet fully awake, but her day has begun. Bread to bake. Water to carry. And later. By the fire, a moment of quiet, needle in hand, thread between fingers. Caterina is not a scholar. She cannot read Latin. But she has her own language. One taught by grandmothers and aunts. Whispered, passed from linen chest to linen chest, she selects a piece of flax-white linen for her youngest child. A smock, worn under doublets and tunics. Just along the neckline, she begins to stitch, not initials, not words, but a tiny branch of oak. Oak means strength. Her child has been weak in the winter. This charm, she hopes, will carry him forward, and so it begins, the unspoken language of embroidered symbols. This was common across Europe, though styles and meanings varied. A single 8-pointed star stitched near the chest might mean protection from nightmares. A tulip, love. A sunburst, warmth. Knotted patterns, borrowed from ancient folk motifs, meant to confuse evil spirits, who, it was believed, could not follow loops or angles. In some regions of Eastern Europe, birds were popular. A small swallow near the hem. Swallows brought homecoming, threaded prayers for safe return, especially for soldiers or traveling husbands. There were also ladder motifs. These were fascinating. Small rungs, delicately embroidered, sometimes just 4 or 5 steps. These were meant to guide souls upward while sleeping. Dream ladders. Pathways to divine places. Sometimes the symbols were protective. Other times commemorative. One chemise discovered in a German convent bore dozens of tiny red crosses hidden within the sleeve. Not decorative, each one stitched on the birthday of a lost sibling. Stitch by stitch, grief became ritual. This was a way to hold on to memory. To carry it next to the skin, and of course, there were initials, but even these could carry layered meanings. Lovers exchanged initials stitched in secret places, near the hem, under the arm, even hidden inside the back of the neck. A woman might wear her beloved's letter daily, known only to herself. In some French villages, initials were wrapped in knots, symbolizing a bond. A promise. The knot, it was said, could not be broken by time or distance. The linen, too, carried the person's scent, their warmth, their sweat. It became a second skin. And with the embroidered symbol, it became a spiritual skin as well. This was not fashion. Not ornament. It was belief. It was language when other forms of expression were forbidden, or impossible. Among servants and the poor, it served also a practical need. In households where dozens of linen shirts were washed together, small symbols acted as identification. A pine branch here, a diamond shape there. A mark not just of self, but of belonging. Sometimes, women created their own symbols. They did not have coats of arms or seals, but they stitched meaning nonetheless. A sprig of rue for healing. A fish for fertility. A spiral to protect the womb. These were often stitched in red, the color of life. Red thread, in particular, was seen across many cultures as powerful. It protected, it warded off sickness, it made cloth sacred. Some believed that red thread, stitched in 3 circles, could stop fevers, over time, meanings blurred. A symbol used for love in one town might mean death in another. But that was the beauty of it. It was deeply local, deeply personal, it was language without writing. Felt, not read, the act of stitching became a meditation. Each mark a breath. A way to speak to the unseen, and it endured. While politics changed, and kings fell, and cities burned, these tiny embroidered whispers remained. Silent, soft, and persistent, let us now return to Katerina. She smooths the linen with her hand. Her stitches are uneven, but full of intent. The oak branch curls slightly to the left. She smiles, later, her son will wear it under his tunic. He will feel its warmth, its comfort, and, though he may never see the symbol, he will carry it close. It is this quiet kind of magic, this stitched speech, that we so often forget, but the fabric remembers. So tonight, may your own dreams be gently marked with meaning, like red thread in moonlight, like stars stitched onto linen, like love, worn where no one else can see. The act of washing was not merely a chore. In the Renaissance world, it was a ritual. A rhythm. A quiet performance acted out beside rivers, wells, or stone basins, again and again, through the years and the generations, and within this ritual, linen spoke. It spoke not through voice, but through motion, the folding of cloth, the wringing of water, the shaking of fabric in the wind. And it whispered through charms, stitched silently into seams, brought to the river's edge to be washed, blessed, and made new. Let us walk beside the Arno, near Florence. The year is 1532. It is spring. The waters run strong, swollen from mountain thaw. Women in long wool skirts kneel by flat stones. Their voices murmur like birdsong, low, rhythmic, continuous. The splash of water, the creak of laundry baskets, the slap of linen against stone all form a soft, everyday symphony. Among them is an older woman, Agata. She is known for her hands. Wide, calloused, strong. She carries a wooden paddle and a woven basket of household linen. Each piece has been folded with care. Atop the stack sits a child's shift, embroidered faintly with a stitched cross near the neckline. She soaks it first in warm lye water drawn from ashes. Then, carefully, she unfolds it and lays it flat across the stone. Her paddle rises and falls, rhythmic, deliberate. Between strokes, she pauses. Touches the thread. Smooths the cloth. This child had been sick. Feverish. A prayer was said, and the shift was marked with red thread, the thread that was said to hold the body close and prevent spirits from slipping in. Washing did not erase the charm, it renewed it. In many places, especially across Italy, France, and the Low Countries, women passed down these washing charms. Small rituals said under the breath. Movements done 3 times in a row. Folding a shift inward so the spirit couldn't escape. Dipping the cloth in river water touched by moonlight. It was said that washing linen worn by the sick in running water would carry the illness away. But only if the stitch charm remained intact. Sometimes, thread was tied into the corners of garments before washing. These were knots of protection. Red, or golden yellow. The knots were counted, 3, 5, 7, always odd numbers. Even numbers could invite imbalance. Agata knows this. Her mother taught her. Her daughter watches quietly nearby, helping wring out sleeves. She learns the movements too, though she's too young to stitch yet. In some towns, certain days were best for washing. Friday, for example, was sacred. A day to cleanse, not just cloth, but sorrow. Women who had lost children brought linens to the river that day. The sound of washing mixed with prayer, and some women sang as they worked, but not songs for entertainment. these were thread songs, old, wordless hums meant to carry blessings into the weave. Historians have recorded accounts of women across the Basque Country and eastern France humming these same melodies for centuries. No written music. Only breath. Only repetition, linen soaked, washed, wrung, and hung. Hung not just to dry, but to breathe. To be reborn. It was believed that the sun blessed cloth and the wind carried away grief. A chemise, once washed and sun-warmed, was safer to wear. Lighter. Protective, even laundresses in cities followed these rituals. In Paris, near the Seine, linen was often washed before sunrise. Women wore scarves over their hair and muttered small protective rhymes. These were not noblewomen. They were hired workers. But they carried on the same gestures, the same logic. A belief in continuity. One diary from 1547 mentions a laundress named Eloise who stitched a small fish near the sleeve cuff of her own shirt. She washed clothes for a hospital and feared illness. She wore the fish as a charm, not because she believed in magic, but because it brought her comfort. This is the heart of the matter. It was not grand ceremony. It was not superstition for spectacle. It was quiet, lived comfort. Ritual born from experience, passed by observation, never written down. When the linen was clean, it was folded in threes, folded like a letter, and returned to drawers lined with bay leaves, rosemary, or lavender. Herbs to protect against moths. And, some believed, against sadness. Agata places her linens in the sun. A breeze lifts them gently. She hums a thread song, and the cloth listens. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine the smell of rosemary. The feel of sun-warmed linen. The soft hush of a breeze stirring fabric on a line. The slow ritual of washing not just to clean, but to renew, to bless, to hope. Linen was never just cloth, it was memory. It was meaning, and when touched by water, it whispered back. Not all embroidery was meant for beauty. Some was for safety. When danger couldn't be seen, it was stitched instead, into cuffs, collars, hems. Little patterns. Little prayers. A private shield, made not of iron, but of thread. In the Renaissance world, where medicine was still rooted in herbs and balance, and illness came like shadow on the wind, protection was often carried in cloth. We begin now with a simple sleeve. The garment is worn. Faded linen, stitched by hand. Near the wrist, a narrow red zigzag. Delicate, imperfect, the zigzag is no mere decoration. It's an old mark, a charm against fever. In some German regions, this pattern was known as the Zigzag der Woge, zigzag of the wave. It was meant to break the flow of bad humors. Some said it confused spirits. Others believed it trapped them in the angles, like fish in a net. This sleeve belonged to a woman named Marta, a midwife in Rothenburg, around the year 1510. Her linens carried many such patterns. Along the neckline of her chemise were stitched spiral shapes, symbols for the womb, for fertility, for safe birth. Marta did not speak Latin, but she understood her thread. She used red for protection, blue for calming, green for healing. When she delivered a child, she often gave the mother a small bundle, linen scraps tied with colored thread. Some women kept them under pillows. Others wore them tucked in bodices. Little cloth blessings, superstition. Perhaps. But in a time without antiseptic, without clean hospitals, these rituals were powerful. Not because they were magic, but because they were care. We forget now how deeply superstition and safety once entwined. The old stitchers knew, there were alphabets of protection, cross shapes, tridents, keys. Not letters, but signs. In Italy, a popular pattern was the wolf's tooth, a repeating triangle along the edge of underclothes. It symbolized strength and alertness. Mothers stitched it into children's shirts. In Hungary and Poland, symbols of the sun, a simple 8-point star, were placed near the heart. They protected against cold. A physical cold, yes, but also spiritual, the loneliness that slipped in during long winters, and knots were everywhere. Stitched knots were not tangled by accident. They were designed. Looping shapes, always closed. A reminder that nothing could escape. That evil had no entry point. Some midwives stitched a double knot on the back of a swaddling cloth, so the child would not be taken by wind. A phrase used when infants passed suddenly in their sleep. Even thread color had meaning. Red was the most powerful. Always red. Across Europe, it was believed to carry life and ward off disease. But red wasn't easy to afford. The dye came from madder root, or insect resin, and took time to fix to thread, so when red appeared in embroidery, it mattered. It was a gift. A sign of labor. Not all protection was hidden. Some women wore symbols outwardly. A little stitched charm at the front of a bodice. A ladder near the shoulder. But more often, it was tucked inward, intimate, quiet. In convents, linen was marked with crosses and sacred letters. In peasant homes, it was marked with family signs, pine needles, hammers, grain stalks. Each was a promise, you are safe. Protection also came in how linen was worn. A smock worn inside out could ward off the evil eye. A thread knotted at sunrise and not undone until nightfall brought good harvest. A chemise never turned inside out after dark, lest it draw spirits inward. These beliefs seem strange now. But they were rules of survival, and even in their silence, they gave comfort. Let us return to Marta. She sits by candlelight, her hands steady. Her son has had a fever for 2 nights. She picks up his undershirt and begins to stitch, just near the hem, a small sun. 8-pointed. Slow, thoughtful movements. Her lips do not move, but in her mind, a rhythm, a memory, a promise. She finishes. Folds the cloth. Places it beside his bed, and when the child sleeps, she sleeps too. That night, her hands rest, but her stitch still speaks. You see, protection was never only about power. It was about presence. The mother's hand. The woman's gesture. The body, cared for, even in absence. Tonight, as you drift into rest, think of these old marks, not as myth, but as memory. Each stitch was someone saying, I will keep you safe. And even now, that comfort remains, soft as red thread in linen. Some pieces of linen were not passed down. They were not folded carefully into cedar-lined chests. Not embroidered with names or charms. Not saved as heirlooms. Some pieces were simply left behind, buried, boarded up, walled in. Forgotten not in carelessness, but in circumstance. In haste. In sorrow. In silence. And yet, these are the ones that often speak the loudest. Let us begin not in a palace, nor a museum, but beneath floorboards. In 1891, during the renovation of a crumbling house in Delft, workers found a small linen shift. It was folded tightly, wrapped in waxed parchment, and placed in a corner beneath the hearthstones. Alongside it, a sprig of rosemary, now long withered. And a single glass bead, no name. No date. No owner recorded. But the linen had been worn. It was stained faintly. Softened by use. A tiny charm, a stitched eye, was nearly hidden along the inside hem. What does this mean? Some historians believe it was part of a burial preparation. Others say it was a charm offering, left beneath the hearth to protect the home after a child's death. Still others suggest it was hidden in haste during plague, when fabric from the sick was sometimes burned, or concealed, we may never know, but what we do know is this: linen held meaning even when it was unseen. In recent years, archaeologists and textile historians have uncovered dozens of such forgotten garments, not in vaults, but in walls, under floorboards, behind hearthstones, even buried in dry wells. In England, they call them concealment garments, often children's clothes, tiny smocks, stained sleeves, ragged necklines, and often, these forgotten cloths carried hidden stitches. Little spirals, knots, suns. Threads faded to ghost pale pink, some had been washed. Others had not. A child's linen shirt found in a Suffolk farmhouse attic in 1973 still held a faint scent of lavender. It was stitched with two small crosses, one red, one black. Experts believe it was folded and hidden in the attic beams after the child died of measles. A quiet farewell. A ritual without a grave. In other cases, the story is reversed. Some pieces were hidden not after death, but to prevent it. Protective linen was sometimes walled up inside chimneys, placed there to draw illness or evil spirits up and out. Like lightning rods for unseen forces, a German farmhouse yielded such a piece in the 1920s, a shirt with heavy red stitching along the neckline, placed behind the kitchen wall. The stitching formed interlocked triangles, meant to trap harm. No record of whose it was. Only the garment remained. Why linen? Because linen touched the body. It absorbed warmth, sweat, breath. It held the shape of a person's life. And so, when something was feared, or deeply cherished, that linen became a vessel. It could be hidden, offered, protected. There's a museum in Krakow that preserves a piece of linen once found in a sealed clay jar, buried in a garden. It is so fragile, it cannot be displayed. But its description reads: child's nightshirt, white linen, stitched with 2 blue knots and 1 black cross. No other record. Only that quiet remnant, and perhaps that is enough. We do not always need the full story. Sometimes the story is in the fact that someone stitched the symbol at all. That someone chose not to throw it away. That someone wrapped it in paper, or tucked it into shadow, or folded it with trembling hands and sealed it with a prayer. What we see now, hanging behind glass, studied under light, was once sweat-soaked, tear-stained, carried against skin. These were not decorative objects, they were part of living. And, sometimes, of leaving. As you breathe tonight, imagine this: a child's shirt, barely 6 inches wide, folded tightly in the corner of a chimney. Linen wears thin, it frays at the collar, loosens at the sleeve, and softens beneath the hands. It does not last forever, and yet, something within it does. Long after the stitches have faded, long after the names are forgotten, linen remains a quiet thread that runs through history, like breath through sleeping lungs. This is not simply about fabric. This is about memory, about presence, about a kind of everyday magic so subtle we almost miss it. Let's begin not with a museum piece, but with a garment long disintegrated. Imagine a chemise worn by a woman who walked daily through a village path. She wore it under her dress for years, through heat, through chill, through childbirth and mourning. The linen absorbed not just her sweat, but her laughter, her grief, her prayers whispered before dawn. We will never see this chemise. It's gone, but the idea of it lingers, as surely as smoke leaves behind scent. There's something remarkable in the quiet continuity of underclothes. Unlike outerwear, they were rarely made to impress. They were stitched to comfort, to protect, to accompany the most private moments: the child's first shift, a midwife's apron, a widow's nightgown. These were not heroic artifacts. They were deeply human ones. Some bore invisible marks, small threads of protection, as we've seen. Others bore stains, patches, signs of life lived without pause for preservation. And yet, centuries later, these garments surface, or are remembered, and their presence carries weight. A study in Florence catalogued over 400 fragments of household linen from Renaissance homes. Many bore no insignia. No embroidery. Just plain weave, worn thin, bearing only the record of human touch, and that was enough. The worn softness of a sleeve edge, the bend in fabric where an elbow always rested. The slight shadow of a shoulder seam rubbed smooth by daily use. Even without symbols, linen became sacred through repetition. There is something profound about a garment that touches the body daily for decades. Something eternal about fibers warmed by breath over and over, then folded away, sewn again, or passed along. Historians often speak of material culture, the objects that define a time, but linen is more than material. It is presence itself. It was there when babies were swaddled, when elders were bathed, when couples lay quietly beneath candlelight. It was there when illness came. When healing came. When sleep came. Some garments were buried with the dead, a final softness. Others were inherited. Torn into cleaning cloths. Or stitched into quilts. Recycled again and again until only threads remained, and yet, even a thread can carry memory. Let us imagine a final scene. A young woman in 1605 finds a trunk of linen left by her grandmother. Most are yellowed and torn. But one piece remains mostly intact, a nightshirt stitched with tiny suns along the hem. She holds it. Presses it to her face. Folds it carefully. She does not wear it. She places it in a drawer, not as a relic, but as something living. She mends her own chemise with a small patch from the nightshirt, carrying the thread forward. This is how linen becomes eternal. Not by lasting forever, but by continuing, by being worn, then remembered, by being torn, then mended, by being forgotten. Then found again. It may no longer be whole, but its meaning deepens with every fray. So tonight, as you drift softly toward sleep, think of the cloth that once warmed a body like yours, centuries ago. Think of the hands that stitched and washed and folded. Not for fame. Not for legacy. But for love. These hands still echo in the threads, and though the linen may be faded, its meaning is not. Another whisper from the past, now fading into the night. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more sleepy stories from history. And until next time,